Folks, today we have something incredible going on right here. This is Devdar number 2 for By God Alone, and it is all about ecclesiastical power and rights. And I'm really excited to work through this, because while the personal note of your faith is interesting, this right here is the systemic framework that will turn this into something CK3 simply lacks. And that is a system that will limit you, that will give you options, and that will always be around you like a harness, because that is what life at this time was like. I'm really excited for this. We're going to talk about missionary work, we're going to talk about archdioceses, we're going to talk about the historical context so that I can say about a couple of things. I really like this and I do not like this, although I gotta tell you, most of this stuff sounds really good. I hope that the implementation is also really there. There are two things that aren't really being talked about here, although one at least has been mentioned, so I want to bring this out right now. The first one is Antipopes, super big topic in many ways. Antipopes were more complex than we really see in these games in general, be it CK2 or be it EU5. But where I'm more coming from on this topic is that Antipopes is something that needs to be here. Currently, we don't know too much about it, except it's supposedly there. The other thing is the Investiture topic in general, not just the Investiture crisis. We're obviously seeing Guelphs and Ghibellines come with silk and silver. So that will be a situation mostly focused on the HRE and Northern Italy, but in general, the Investiture, of course, was a huge topic that shifted between these years. Not to go too far into this topic, but basically, in 867, you didn't have the Pope appoint really much of anybody. It was largely something run by secular lords, and that was incredibly vital, for example, for the German Empire, for the German Kingdom and the Holy Roman Empire to utilize its power, because that is the backbone. The imperial church system is the backbone of the imperial power in general, and that pivots, that changes, because once we then hit 1066, thanks to the Gregorian reforms, the papacy is fighting not only to fend off secular rulers anointing bishops on their own, but also the Holy Roman Empire actually having supremacy over the Pope, which had been the case up until that point in the largest degree. So we have a big shift there in who gets to announce bishops and what exactly is going on there. We haven't heard anything about this, and you're going to see it in a little element here in this particular dev diary that it sounds like it's not really there. We're gonna see about it, okay? I am really hoping, crossing my fingers here, that we're getting a nice representation of it, because again, this power shift, the decentralized church that allowed the Holy Roman Empire to rise despite there not being governors or a state system, but they can rely on the bishops, and the powerful families play into that as well. All of that then shifting into the papacy taking control, centralizing Christianity, and leading us into the state that it was in, that leads ultimately to the Reformation, is something that is really important. Neither Antipopes nor Investiture really in here, but a lot of other topics, and let me just say, they are nailing it in many ways. Now, with all that out of the way, let's just jump into this. Happy Tuesday, Mikkel here again with another update on the development of By God Alone. Last week we talked a lot about rites, and this week we're going to talk about their finer details. How they start, how they spread, how they go wrong, where the line is between local devotion and outright heresy. We're going to keep that promise, but we're also going to come at it sideways, because rites in CK3 are not free-floating ideas. They are things specific characters do in specific places, and the places matter as much as the theology. To illustrate this, let's see how the mission of Kirill and Methodius, not sure how it's pronounced in English, I'm going to use the German pronunciation, plays out in the expansion, since many of you are likely familiar with this story. The year is 869. King Rastislav of Moravia, your current character, possibly has spent the last couple of years in a peculiar kind of correspondence. A pair of brothers, Kirill and Methodius, arrived in his court at the end of the previous decade and taught the Holy Scriptures in his language, which was a novelty. They translated scripture into Church Slavonic, which had also not particularly been done. The work was good. The local clergy noticed. The clergy in Salzburg, several days right west, also noticed, and were not pleased. Kirill and Methodius traveled to Rome to settle the matter. Kirill died there, but Methodius came home with the Pope's blessing and a tightly defined parcel of permission. A Slavic liturgy, in the local tongue, recognized but contained. It is a real thing. It's also, structurally, a divergent variant of Christianity, a rite. If we take a look at the screenshot, we see a situation. This is the Moravian mission. By your request, the devoted Thessalonian brothers Kirill and Methodius have begun a sacred mission to aid you in evangelizing the realm and adapting Christianity, with a new script native to your people. You can see right here, conversion progress, converted counties and target counties, so we're looking at like 15 target counties, because this is 6 and it's almost in the center. Then we got Kirill and, of course, Methodius. He is the actual archbishop, there he is, of the Archdiocese of Moravia. Cool. This is the Slavic rite. We already see a difference there. This is the full territory that needs to be converted. You see what is going on. Cool stuff. I want to say, before we even get into the topic of missionary work in general, we're going to do this later, this is not how all missionary work will work, okay? I thought it might be like a proper situation, but no. I want to stress a couple of things there, and that is that It's a bit of a mischance, but you can still do it great, even if it's not like a proper situation that gets dynamically started, right? There were people like, oh, what about like landless characters? No, listen, this is why I didn't like landless characters being locked behind a DLC, because working on those features now means that you're only working on features that will impact people that also have access to landless characters, which means they need to own another DLC. So we're not gonna see that, okay? Maybe in like half a decade or so, when the game is a bit more matured. Anyway, let's carry on. That story plays out more or less in that shape in any 867 campaign in our current build. At the end of it, if you played your cards right, Methodius creates a new Rite, which enters the religious geography of Europe. Slavic Rite is Christian, but carries Anachoresis, Dulia, and Adaptive as its starting core tenets. Scandalously, the Rite also permits priests to get married, which, while not unheard of within mainline Chalcedonian Christianity, was at least frowned upon at this time. The Slavic Rite may be a pre-scripted storyline, but it leverages a more generalized system, which is what we'll be talking about today. Let's talk about Ecclesiastical Titles. I got nothing negative about this to say, just for the record. Again, this is not how generalized missionary work works. We're going to talk about that once we're done with Ecclesiastical Titles. However, this is good. It looks fun, it's decent, I like it. Why not? As mentioned above, rites are not random ideas floating about in the air. They live on the map, on counties and provinces, and are informed by a new title layer we have added called Ecclesiastical Titles. The generic term for the modders out there is Clerical Region Titles, which can be leveraged to create analogous mechanics for your total conversion mod or whatever. A Game of Thrones, here you go. In the west they are known as archdioceses, in the east as patriarchates. They sit underneath the secular map. Your kingdom of West Francia contains several archdioceses. The Archbishop of Rhin holds one of them. His counties overlap parts of your domain and parts of Lotharingia, and his ecclesiastical authority does not particularly respect either of your realm borders. These titles broadly follow the ancient Roman administrative borders the medieval church inherited and then proceeded to argue about for centuries. However, they are shaped differently in each of the 867, 1066 and 1178 start dates to reflect the evolution of the church's reach over these eras. Where a Christian kingdom emerges that doesn't host one, which might happen more than you might think, especially over a long period, a new ecclesiastical title can be created by the head of faith. Up-and-coming local clergy, especially ones backed by powerful secular rulers and perhaps a cathedral of the latest architectural fashion, can also petition the papacy for his own see, or request the merger of their see and neighboring one if its archbishop is sufficiently hapless. We are seeing dynamic titles that are independent of secular de jure titles and that vie for influence and power. This matters a lot. Now, somebody points out in the thread, so you're only doing archdioceses, you're not doing dioceses, right? So there are bishops and then there are archbishops, and I gotta tell you, with the density of counties, I think it's fine to only have archdioceses. Yes, bishops also played a big role, and a significant one. The Ottonian dynasty, for example, had to fight over splintering Merseburg, and if you had to deal with that on the level, because it's a tiny area, really, then there's a lot going on with a lot of characters that have no power and that you don't really care about. I can see a world where archdioceses should also have dioceses, but honestly, I think this is okay. This general splintering here looks fine to me. So I'm personally on board with this. Whether you are is, of course, up to you. What we have right here is 867, classic stuff, Jerusalem, Antioch, we got Constantinople. Then over here, of course, we have the classic Roman provinces as well. And then right here, east of the Rhine, we got Cologne, Trier, Mainz, and Salzburg. These are important. Oh, and actually, we also have Hamburg, which at this point, I believe, already, I think they got raided in the 40s, so 840s. This is already Hamburg-Bremen. At this point, situated, I believe, in Bremen, but still technically Hamburg-Bremen, right? All of these are set up, and then boom, in 1066 we have a different setup. You see Mainz has blobbed into Bohemia, you see Magdeburg here, founded by Otto the Great, and kind of really imbursed with a lot of power and a lot of freedom, really, because they were meant to convert all of these territories, and technically initially had the demand to also integrate these territories into the imperial church. You can see that didn't happen. We got Gniezno, so this is Polish. Then, of course, we have Esztergom right there, and we have Kiev all the way up there. Over here, we got still Hamburg, Bremen, because this archdiocese was promised and then indeed did receive the complete control of any sees that were to be created in the Scandinavian territories, so what used to be Norse, right? All of these have expanded and done missionary work. Now, this is where I want to talk about missionary work and about kind of what that meant, right? We have some response here about missionary work. Let's take a look at it. Will we be able to send missions as well? We didn't want to do a whole send a landless NPC out as a missionary, again, because then they need to do landless content, whatever. Maybe in another expansion, we will tackle this more granular approach to religious missions. What we will have in BGO, by God alone, is a mass conversion grade project, where relevant characters can opt to send missionaries, but more in the abstract, and other optional contributions at a cost. I think this implementation is fine. Okay, there are two things that I have in mind, and we're going to go back to the map to really talk about this. Converting territories was important for the sake of your own soul, for furthering the glory of your realm and the benefits that your realm will get from God, because you are being very virtuous Christians. Conversion is incredibly important in this particular time period, especially if you are a frontier ruler, which the Germans, or well, the East Francians most certainly were. Conversion is a tool of your faith, satisfying you and putting you in good standing with God overall, which is vital to these people. We're getting back here to personal faith, spiritual fulfillment, but it also is a tool of power, okay? An example that is already over in 867, but that is nonetheless very interesting to point out, is that the Saxons were of course converted relatively late in the existence of the Carolingian realm. In general, you can see the Carolingian realm here. This is all that you see, right? When the Saxons were converted, or were being converted, and there were conversion efforts, missionaries were sent, and they were introduced to the teachings of the church, this was done by sending priests from the Frankish core territories, because the Frankish core territories were exerting their control and spreading their power into Saxon territories. This also included relics of the Frankish core territories going all the way to the Saxons. In 867, this essentially has already changed. We have evidence of the dukes of, well, not really dukes yet at the time, but like magnates, I guess, of Saxony, of the Ludolfinger dynasty, going down to Rome and bringing back a relic from Rome directly. What does that indicate? That indicates that this conversion work is over. They are now standing on their own and have their own connection all the way down to the very center of Western Christianity. We see this exact same pattern with the conversion work that then goes further east. Okay, so as the Poles are being converted by Saint Adalbert of Prague, Wojciech as he is known, he was Bohemian and he actually was educated in Magdeburg, so in the archbishopric founded by Otto the Great, specifically as archbishopric intended to convert the Slavs to the east. He gets educated there and he becomes Bishop of Prague, and he does missionary work in, I believe, in the Hungarians as well? Am I off there? I don't think so. And then, of course, in the Prussians, where he gets martyred, which is a fun way of saying that he passed away involuntarily. The work that connects Poland to Christianity springs from these missionary archbishoprics. This means that they are their patrons, and this can be expressed in a great project, right? You pour money into this, you fund this brings glory to you, but it also kind of connects it to it. I would really like it if there's a chance here of directly acting out power. Like you can see it right here in 1066, the Archdiocese of Hamburg-Bremen is spread all the way over Scandinavia. I really hope that initially, when I do missionary work in a great project, that they get added, or at least have a chance to get added to my archbishopric, or whatever archbishopric is driving it, right? If we take a look at it, this here, it kind of sounds like, oh, they emerge where there isn't one and they just get one. That's basically what did happen with Poland, to be clear here. Gniezno was founded in 1000 with the consent of the German Emperor. Otto III went over there actually he was very friendly with the Duke of the Poles, Bolesław, which is probably not how you pronounce it, my apologies again. And that is also when the Archdiocese of Gniezno was created. And so that is essentially when Poland starts taking the position that the Saxons have in 867 at the start of the game. In 1000, Poland gets a direct wire to the Vatican, to Rome, instead of having a wire through Magdeburg, through Mainz, and so on. The Bohemians, for example, this never happens. Well, okay, of course, they also get a direct wire to Rome, but they remain a part of Mainz. I would like it if there could be an alternative outcome, where Gniezno remains a part of Magdeburg, and the HRE does everything it can to keep Poland integrated in its sphere of power. These conversion efforts were fundamentally an effort to keep them in the orbit of the Holy Roman Empire. This is true for Hungary, for Poland, for, of course, Prussia, for the Wends right here, and for the Scandinavians. Denmark, Poland, Hungary, all at some time, including Bohemia, of course, but Bohemia actually stuck around, were part of the sphere of the Holy Roman Empire, partially even seen as feudal vassals to a large degree, tributaries, however you want to classify it in CK3. What I mean to say here, without really falling into the trap of being overly accurate in a period where we just do not have that much accurate information of what the vassal relationship really was like, they had them in their orbit thanks to their missionary work. And as they mature, they gain independence, they go their own way, and, well, the HRE, in certain ways, tries to desperately reintegrate them. We have, for example, then the fights between Heinrich II, the successor of Otto III, and Poland, which Poland succeeds in. They win, at the very least, a stalemate, basically, but They outlast Heinrich and then are elevated to be a kingdom in 1025. He dies, I believe, in 1024, right? But the idea here being is, these archdioceses, if I convert you, I should also get kind of dibs. I should have the choice of saying, I want your money to go to Magdeburg, because Magdeburg is underneath me primarily, and that means that I collect the money from that archdiocese. We have a responsibility, but also a hegemon kind of relationship between these areas. You need to send missionaries, you need to send relics, you need to help them build up churches, but then in return, they are in your orbit. They might remain in that orbit like Bohemia did, or they might not remain in that orbit like Poland did, which successfully again made its way outside of it. We do not have an indication that this is the case with missionary work. We know that missionary work is, in this case, a great project, which, like I said, is fine. If you were thinking that they were going to add this to Landless Adventurers, listen, you're crazy because it's a DLC locked feature. What are you expecting? It's not happening. But this right here sounds to me more like if I convert them, they stay empty and then they can petition the Pope and that's it. I hope that that isn't the case, but it's not really clearly explained. I really hope that essentially I am able to pull them into my orbit, because that is the exact story of Poland, Bohemia, Denmark, Hungary, the Saxons, not last but not least. And even actually, interestingly enough, let me highlight this. During the Northern Crusades, many of the bishoprics that were in the Baltics were directly subservient to Mainz, and there was a massive struggle. I read so much on this before I was playing EU5 actually. There was a massive struggle between the Archdiocese of Mainz, so the German guarantors of the Northern Crusade, that had fully taken over funding at this point, which is why the Northern Crusaders stopped listening to the Pope and the Pope. The Northern Crusaders were unbelievably brutal to the pagans because they wanted to destroy them, because that would mean they could add this territory long-term to the Archdiocese of Mainz, to the Holy Roman Empire, to their sphere of influence, right? The papacy sent legates. They fought battles against the Northern Crusaders in the hope of getting this territory directly under the control of the Vatican, thereby making it so that the destruction of the pagans on a level of life and death wasn't that severe, and that could then become an independent area the same way that Poland became an independent area many centuries beforehand. This stuff is vital, but it's not detailed here. This sounds like I turned Christian and then I'm like, hey Pope, can I get an archdiocese? Which is how it happened, but you always have to see the guarantor having interests in your territory as well. I gotta tell you right now, I'm not directly seeing this in here, but that's mostly, I think, because I'm not discussing what happens if missionary work is done successfully. I'm fine with missionary work being something that happens and just via a great project, but I really hope that this patron and patronized relationship is something that stays. So from my point of view, something that was massive in this time period and played a huge role in tying realms to your own realm and to your right, I really hope that that is in here despite that not being really discussed. It doesn't sound like missionary work gets that done. I just wanted to talk about it because, again, this history is exactly what plays a massive role right here, and you can then see it lived out here in 1066, but this is just a pre-scripted thing. It's not proper missionary work, right? In being independent, whereas Bohemia is not, because they never underwent this kind of dissolution of the HRE sphere. Instead, they just drifted more and more into it. Now, to talk about this a little bit more, the Archbishop or Patriarch holding one of these is an actual person with an actual job. He has subordinate bishops to oversee. Again, it just doesn't function like they're not that important. It's just they give him their money. He sees to the faithfulness and souls of local Christian rulers. He starts and administers church-related great projects in his region. He ensures everyone in the region follows the right teachings. When his see vacates, the next holder is selected from local clergy by a clerical appointment score. We're still tuning the factors, so I'm not going to walk you through the formula, but the principle is that the next Archbishop of Rhin is somebody you can scout before he gets there and have some influence over. The head of faith can also override the local process, parachuting in a preferred cardinal over the heads of an aggrieved local clergy. That happens sometimes. God works in mysterious ways. This really only happened after 1066. In 867, the Pope just didn't have that power. For the longest period after the foundation of the Holy Roman Empire, really, the Pope was also just a proper puppet of the Holy Roman Emperor, at the mercy of the Emperor, and often kicked out by the Roman citizenry and then reinstated by the Emperor. But he didn't really have that much say there. In fact, really, he just pushed whatever candidate that the Emperor wanted, which you could still do in this system, right? Parachuting in a cardinal there. I will also say, though, that before the Gregorian reforms, we are looking at basically full control of the secular ruler, putting in whoever they want. Right, this is investiture. Again, they're not going into details here. This just being done via clerical appointment score. I mean, you can do a clerical appointment score and then I can go, nope, I choose somebody else as emperor, as king, as whatever, right? That could just be a feature that works. I can see investiture and the investiture crisis to properly work here, but I will also tell you that obviously Guelphs and Ghibellines are coming with silk and silver, meaning that maybe it's gonna be done there. We'll see. When they talk about it, they talk about it. Right now, doesn't really seem to be that much information. Now, moving on. So we know that you have these, they spread, you can get new ones. For example, if you go all the way to China, you create a new Christian kingdom there. You weren't converted by anybody, so you just call the Pope and go like, hey, can I become an archdiocese? And then 100 years later, you have a Chinese Pope. Why not, right? These are the things that you can do right there. Now, as mentioned, there are no dioceses directly underneath them, but I'm completely fine with this. I think this is the level that you want to work with. What I'm a bit confused of, by the way, and I just want to bring this up as a side note because they're not discussing it here either, the Carolingians, but also after the Carolingians, held many, so in this area, I mean, held many synods and councils. We have heard so far only about ecumenical councils, which includes all of Christianity. They held synods that were regional, right? Where like a regional decision was made of who gets transferred where, for example, like this rite into this one, so like, or this archdiocese into that archdiocese, and so on and so forth. But also about like inheritances and who should be the next bishop and who should, for example, be punished, who should get clemencia, so mercy, that kind of thing. I don't know whether smaller councils are in here. Maybe they kind of abstracted them away into saying that when you tell your puppet archbishop, hey, I want my rite to change, put this tenet in instead, right? That has an implied council, but they don't want to hoist this like council activity onto you, so they just don't. I don't know, but these synods were insanely important and held with unbelievable frequency, settling various issues of the realm. If they're in, that would be cool, but I honestly doubt it, because again, I mean, I don't know, it would be cool, but I feel like they would talk about it if they were in the game. Ecumenical councils is the only thing mentioned so far. It doesn't sound like we had regional synods at all. They had regional synods, for example, before the battles against the Hungarian, both the one in the north, but then also the other one near Augsburg, right? They had these synods where they essentially agreed, we need to fight this now. How do we do resources? How do we pray for our souls, for the blessing of God? And those were held, of course, for that express purpose of war preparation, of ensuring that we're all on the same page, and had a ritual that essentially gives us the mercy of God. These things did matter. They might have abstracted them away, and honestly, it's kind of okay. An important aspect of tending to a flock is to make sure they have an impressive house to worship in. Currently, in CK3, some important cathedrals exist in fixed locations on the map as great buildings. And by God alone, most grand cathedrals will be constructed and reconstructed when a new, more impressive architectural style emerges. This is awesome, I love that. Dynamically via great projects. As such, they can be placed anywhere, but most commonly, they will appear in the designated seats of archdioceses. Makes sense. You want to build them up, you want to prop them up, so that they can govern more easily. As a secular ruler, of course, it means that your archdiocese now becomes more important, and you can then wield that power against others, however you want to do it. Here we see the great project, Grand Cathedral in Göttingen. On project completed, the local archbishop gains a Grand Cathedral domicile. A Grand Cathedral great project building is constructed in the selected barony, and you gain piety. Vast quantities of stone, master mason, bronze bells, we got ornate facade and portico, and sacred frescoes. There's a lot going on here. I hope that it actually kind of remembers families that pitched in. I think that's always fun, if they actually did that. Construction is roughly 30 in-game years at the default rate, a lifetime in CK3 terms, or even potentially a multi-generational endeavor, and is funded by the holding archbishop and contributed to by anyone in the region who feels strongly enough about it. Local lieges, the top liege, vassals, allies, the head of faith, if he likes you. Once a grand cathedral is built, it is a piece of geography you cannot ignore. It also serves as a domicile for the clergy holding it, and as such can be expanded upon over time. The Salzburg Ecclesiastical Estate. Grand Cathedral, archives, right, yeah, okay, great art, as always, the CK3 art team. Fire everybody else, just give them all the budget for the team. I love this guy's face. What is it about this guy's face? Say here on the right. Anyway, cathedrals and other great buildings designated as religious sites can be turned into holy sites. Dynamic holy sites. I've asked for this in an Imperator Rome video. What CK3 can learn from Imperator Rome before CK3 came out. Even better, I asked for that as well though. This requires the head of faith to bless the site as such, and also demands it contain a holy relic of some kind. This is awesome. This is cool. I love it. Gniezno is a great case for this as well, right? Because in Gniezno they had the bones of Saint Adalbert. So this is obviously really cool having these relics there. I hope that I can rate these relics, that I can move these relics, right? Kind of akin to just what Imperator Rome did. You can check the video out. It's still on my channel if you want to. I really love to see it. This is just excellent. This is how you create a holy site, how you create an impactful location, and how you center an entire region around you, right? That is how Santiago happened, that is how Canterbury happened, that is how Prague, how Gniezno, and so on happened as well. I talked about the relics, and we have these relics here, but we don't learn anything about them. I really hope that we see this kind of tendency between patron and being converted, right? Where you send in relics and then maybe after all you receive relics directly from Rome or from other centers of Christianity that tie you to certain archdioceses or maybe make you independent. That would be awesome. I also hope that these cathedrals, kind of, to a degree, have to be funded by your patrons as well to build you up and such. It's a responsibility, but also comes with privileges, like I said earlier. Look, I went into such great detail earlier because, man, I really need this to be something cool because there's so much purpose behind this with how they did it, with why they did it, and so on. Maybe they're just not saying that it's exactly like this, but you know what, we can be surprised going forward. We got some churches here, or cathedrals, I should say. They're great. I love them. Yeah, really cool. Awesome. I will save the proper holy sites diary for another week since it's still being iterated on, but the point I want to land today is that a cathedral elevates the archbishop who holds it. The occupant of a wealthy, well-built metropolitan see is someone the Pope listens to. The administrator of a poor see run out of an unconsecrated chapel with no relics is not. Most of the political weight that you, the player, eventually want an archbishop of yours to throw around in council comes from making him the kind of man whose cathedral is famous enough, leading to a larger flock of followers and pilgrims. This, again, we see everything that I talked about here, right? I don't even need to go into the depth here. We see this with mines incredibly well equipped, and because of this massive influence all the way to the Baltics and over various other dioceses around them. Let's talk about church funds. Cathedrals are costly to construct, and while patronage was a major source of that wealth, much of it falls on the church to fund. So, how does the archbishop get his funding? As we have mentioned previously, the new ecclesiastical government type has access to a treasury fueled by taxes, tithes, collected by local bishops, which flows up through the church hierarchy to be used to promote the faith. This is driven by the ecclesiastical lease, which is the contract under which Christian temples' holdings are leased to clergy. In addition to gold being funneled up through vassal realm priest structure as usual, we now also get a slice of money that flows through the organization through the treasury system. Bishops to archbishops, archbishops to pope, typically. Of course, a character can be both an archbishop and the court chaplain of a king or emperor. This gives them two sources of income. The normal coins you collect and the treasury that you collect, right? One gold-based and one treasury-based. It also gives the king in question a good reason to ensure their court chaplain is on their side and owes them lots of favors. I would love to learn more about under which conditions I would want my court chaplain to be not the archbishop if I have an archbishop in my realm. I expect that you would always want the archbishop so that they can influence you and vice versa. The ecclesiastical treasury can be used for a lot of things. Title creation, holding construction, mercenary contracts, holy order endowments, calling ecumenical councils, contributing to a cathedral somewhere far from Rome. It can also be squirreled away by a less than scrupulous metropolitan who needs a little cash infusion for throwing a grand feast. None of us are truly free from sin. A powerful secular ruler with theocratic vassals can also violate the contract relationship. The levy the tithes decision makes every clerical vassal in your realm pay you a one-shot tribute, at the cost of a large amount of piety. We expect some kings to do this occasionally. We expect the Pope to react when they do. Again, like I said, I wish we had a bit of a distinction here between the Pope in the early ages and the Pope later, right? Because that relationship here, where the secular ruler can do this, where the secular ruler can press and name who rules any archdiocese and any diocese as well, was relatively long. We then see this end properly with the Gregorian reforms in the 11th century. Now let's move on to founding a Rite. So, wealthy archbishops on a map that doesn't match anyone's realm, sending the Pope a monthly check on top of running their own buildings. What does any of that have to do with what they teach? A Rite is the answer. Kirill and Methodius founded one. Any clergy character in the right circumstances can found one. A patriarch, an archbishop, the head of a holy order. Awesome. And as we hinted last time, and will detail next time, you have puppets you can work through to do this as a secular Christian ruler. The flow is similar to the old Create Faith UI. The founder picks tenets to elevate or demote and doctrines to swap. Each individual change carries its own piety cost, modulated by the parent faith's fervor. A modest rite that nudges one or two permitted tenets up to core is cheap. An aggressive rite that promotes an anathema teaching is not. The UI shows you a predicted divergence number alongside each candidate change before you confirm. You or your puppet should never be doing this blindly. Let's take a look at this. This is great. You get the Roman Rite. We see Vaticano, we see Santiago. We don't see Canterbury. Oh, we don't see any, we don't see Cologne, right? All of that stuff. Okay, cool. Then we have, of course, Insular, and we have the Carolingian Rite. The Carolingian Rite was massive. Like I said, they held a lot of regional synods, and they tried to be pretty aligned with the Roman Rite as much as they could, while still maintaining, of course, that they are in control of bishops, etc., etc., etc. This, clearly, you can see it right here, by the way it is striped, not too much in Divergence. They're pretty close. Insular, pretty far away. Now, Insular wasn't aggressively, persecuted or anything, but they were further away than the Carolingian Rite. I wonder how exactly this would go. Christiani here, actually, the Bosnian Christianity, famously became under a lot of pressure once think in like 1300 or so, missionaries actually shows up and were like, wait a minute, this is your Christianity? What the hell are you doing here? They were pretty far diverged at that point. But basically, we now get these rites, and it's so exciting. Moravia also pretty aligned, but obviously that might change if you are for a very long time under control of Muslims. I wonder, could a Caliph of the Umayyads, if he still leaves in charge archbishops, influence them? Oh, I wonder. I'm not sure here. The Carolingians may have their own liturgy, and it's very powerful even compared to the influence of Rome, but at least they don't diverge too much in their teachings for now. Those insular Irish, however, yeah, look at them right there. This is insularism, and this is a heretical right there at 65. Once you go over 50, you become heretical. This is insularism versus Chalcedonianism. Let's see here. So the doctrine's more intense. Pluralist versus righteous. Okay, I think insularism should be pluralist, right? Doctrine's less intense. Dynastic is criminal versus close kin is criminal, and clerical marriage allowed. Yeah, okay, so the first one here is always insularism. Then doctrines that are just difference is, oh wow, bewailing burial versus stoic burial is a big divergence here, I gotta tell you. Clerical function, arms and pacification versus control. So, yep, okay, plus 10. This is where they have changed a couple of things. If they remove just literally bewailing burial, which is a massive difference, frankly, you're looking at no longer being heretical, just divergent. Interesting. I like the new interface. I like the virtues here. We see the main doctrines here detailed as well. Yeah, this is awesome. I like that the way that they redesigned this menu. Now, the tenets and doctrines you get to pick from are the ones known to you, or your clergy puppet, as the case may be. You can't just make up a new theological idea you've never been exposed to before, after all. As per our last dev diary, this means studying other faiths or learning about them in some other way, like traveling far and wide, inviting foreign guests, etc. A well-traveled merchant family, for example, might well prove a wealth of foreign knowledge and might originate some very strange ideas if they are put in a position where they can found their own right. That's really cool, actually. If you truly want to be a religious innovator, you can also aim to become a herald through becoming a renowned theologian, which gives you access to tenets nobody has ever heard of before. And the first playthrough that I'm going to do, and it's so stupid, but I'm going to like just start in Japan and instantly leave for Europe and then found my own rite that is literally just Christian Shintoism. Why wouldn't I do it? What the Slavic Rite actually did when Methodius founded it is concrete and embedded into the game. It promoted anachoresis, the Eastern contemplative desert father ideals, where the Roman Rite has apostolic succession, the institutional and hierarchical posture of top-down clergy authority. It kept dulia alongside, because the Slavs were not theologically distant from Rome on the topic of saints, yet it permits clerical marriage where the Roman Rite does not. This makes the clergy married men, embedded in their villages, whose moral and political incentives are different from those of a celibate Roman priest. Interesting, yeah. Look, I see this, I can only say, it's not clear to me how missionary work would work. If I start a missionary project and the Poles, for example, agree, how do we settle on what doctrines they have, whether they will just join my rite, whether they will get their own archdiocese? Those are the big topics that I have here. Obviously, we know, once they exist, how they can either splinter off, or if they don't have an archdiocese, how they can get a new one. Right, we see this right here, where a Christian kingdom emerges that doesn't host one, which might happen more than you might think, especially over a long campaign. A new ecclesiastical title can be created by the head of faith, or alternatively, you can splinter if you are backed by the papacy. All of those I understand, but I'm not fully sure how this relation works in the actual missionary work, and I would love to know. Because man, I would love, let's say for example, being Otto the Great, and I convert the Poles together with Saint Adalbert of Prague, and then I go there and I find out, my god, they made alcohol illegal. Right? Something like this. I think that would be so fun. If the rites actually changed, if they get their own archdiocese, all that stuff, but currently we just do not know. And yeah, so those are my biggest questions here. But the core system, phenomenal. Just amazing. I mean, seriously, what are we talking about here? This is unbelievable content on a systemic level like CK3 has never seen it before. Now let's talk about conversion. I know what you're thinking, but they do not talk at all about pagan conversion here whatsoever. Counties follow rites, not just faiths. This makes them convertible at faster rates if the rites are of the same faith, and metropolitans, archbishops and patriarchs will always do this within their ecclesiastical regions. A powerful archbishop who founds a new rite will quite rapidly ensure his followers adhere to the rite liturgy. Characters can also try to convince one another to switch to their rite. This means neighboring metropolitans might try to convince one another to unify their teachings, which could make a divergent rite quite a power center over time. This increases the pressure on secular rulers to ensure their local metropolitan teaches what they prefer, and gives you a lever to try to promote your own rite across Christendom. I love it. It's awesome. This is how you get long-term movements. You spread it around in your realm, then it goes over the borders, all of a sudden your rite is in charge of what defines your faith on a central level. Again, not sure about pagan conversion, not sure how this works with locations that don't have archdioceses. No idea. But the core function here is very clearly very cool. Let's move on to how far is too far to learn how you become heretical. Every tenet has a status in any given rite, core, permitted, known, or prohibited, and each status carries a weight in the calculation of divergence. Two rites that both treat apostolic succession as core agree. Two rites where one has it core and the other prohibited disagree sharply. Add up the per tenet contributions across the whole list of tenets and doctrines, and you have a divergence score from one rite to its faith's mainline. At 50 points of divergence and above, the rite crosses into what the game flags as potentially heretical territory. A different bucket in the church's politics, a distinct ragged border on the religious map, and, if a pope is in a position and a mood to do something about it, the prospect of a papal bull, naming the rite a heresy outright. The rite's head is then offered a chance to submit and rejoin the mainline. If they choose not to, they will become their own faith, with the consequence of being labeled a heresy of its parent. While this means the total divergence across the parent faith has decreased, which is good for the Pope, having a heretical faith to contend with is not typically good for a stable status quo. This is such a cool gameplay loop. I have complained in the past about many gameplay loops not being designed for you to play them from start to finish, 867 to 1453. Think about this. You have long-term movements where the Pope needs to fight back against certain rites moving too far away, because otherwise you effectively see a splintering and a reformation. There is a constant tug of war basically going back and forth. You as the Pope need to sustain people, but you as a secular ruler might want to change the faith altogether. So what do? You have a rite, you set this rite up with your puppet, that rite spreads throughout Christianity, ecumenical council, and boom, all of a sudden the main part of the faith also now shares this, and the entire religion has been changed. You're no longer in divergence, and we go back to the status quo tug of war between now other things rising up, other rites being against, yada yada. Cool, awesome. This actually is something that you can do and that you should be doing throughout the entire game. You never just go out of it. This is a tug of war that really plays a role there. The only thing that I will mention here is I really wish, basically, if I become a full-on heresy, if I get ousted by the Pope, if I manage to set up an anti-pope and then go in and put him on there, it flips. I really would like this. I think that would be cool, right? At the very least, revoking basically the declaration of heresy, but also maybe making it so that just the main faith changes. Maybe it's possible, I don't know. But they haven't said anything, okay? I really like what they're doing here, though. This is finally a well-rounded gameplay loop, rather than something that you do for a couple of generations, or maybe just one, and then you pivot out and do something totally different. Super, super cool. And I couldn't be happier, actually, that they're doing this, of course, with Christianity, where I do most of my playthroughs. Should you try to create a rite with an immediate divergence score above 100, for example by suggesting all these teachings of the Roman Rite are fine and all, but we should have lay clergy and a temporal head of faith, because that's what God's word truly intended, there's not a pressing need for a lead-up period. You will just be declared a heretical faith outright. Good luck. Makes sense. Time to eat a crusade. Which I also hope they reworked, but who knows, okay? They're not mentioning anything, but we still have plenty of time. Let's talk about in other faiths, because this is also actually cool. Most of what you've learned about today works the same regardless of if you're Christian or not. Most faiths have been split up by rite, and some faiths have become rites where we think it better reflects history. For example, Islam has been reshaped around the major historical branches and schools of law. Sunni, Shia, Kharijite, I heard that this is not what they call themselves, and today is more like a slur for like non-believer people that fell off of doctrine. Not too sure about this, don't know it, but I'm not the best person to talk about this at all. I just want to point it out here. And the early community of Sadr al-Islam are now subdivided into rites, such as Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali, Ismaili, Imami, Zaidi, Ibadi, and others. This lets characters and provinces better reflect regional and historical differences, from North African Malikis to Persian Hanafis and the varied Shia communities of the medieval world. Some groups, such as Druze and Quranism, remain distinct faiths, where that better fits their historical role, because they are that removed. So this is the original, right? And this is it reworked. We got Maliki, we got Shafi'i, we got Shia over there. Yeah, Hanafi, interesting stuff. Really cool. I think that's great that they're actually spreading this. Islam still needs more attention. I love Chalcedonian up there. You see, is that gorgeous? It still needs more attention, but I think this is a great step. Obviously, grand cathedrals don't exist outside Christianity, but the ability to request your local great building be designated as a holy site, and in general, the new dynamic nature of holy sites is universal. Awesome. So cool. Rites can be created, divergences punished, and heresies formed in other faiths as well. The key distinction between Christianity and other religions in By God Alone with respect to the above is the administrative institution of the Church, split up into regions based on ancient Roman provinces. Everything else that's Christian only flows from this. The special titles and interactions of these characters, the way they automatically spread the influence of their rite, the way their money flows through the organization, etc. I think that is okay. This is a system that when we have to deal more with caliphs and when we more have to deal with imams and the way that heresies spring up in Islam, or really in any other religion, right? And when you reform religions, that can be done with this framework as the baseline, which is why it is part, I hope, of the free game. Surely it is. This can be then done with this framework already in place in a later DLC, in a later update. I think that is okay. Them having a mechanic and a system that is universal throughout the game, that is free, I think, and that is a rounded gameplay loop, because you need to maintain the strength of your faith now, is phenomenal. This is the best approach they could have taken. I just have massive questions about Investiture, Antipopes, and how missionary work actually works, and whether I can spread my influence just throughout that. I have questions, but not actual rebuttals right now. This is the positive thing that I want to bring up here. They have at no point denied any of the things that I am hoping for, which makes me think maybe they're coming. Because there are still so many dev diaries to come. Maybe. In the next dev diary for By God Alone, we're going to be talking about puppets and playable theocracies, where we will start to understand how you as a secular ruler can act through clergy without necessarily playing them, and also what to expect if you choose to do so. We will also get into the different types of clergy you can play: prince bishops, archbishops, cardinals, and the big man himself. Next week, we're not going to hear about this. Next week, we're going to hear about silk and silver, at least as far as I understand it. Look, my brain is mush. We're going to take a look at whether they have new responses now waiting for us right here. I am at peace with everything here. I just have questions and hope that these questions are answered with a yes and, rather than a no, we didn't have time. Yeah, to be clear here, we didn't get anything new. We are just learning again here that there is a mass conversion grade project. I really hope that I can kind of spread my wings of my power and pull people into my orbit. But we'll see. We will see indeed how it works. For now, folks, look. This is our year, okay? Tell me what you think. I think from the historical context, they're really hitting it right. I think wherever they are abstracting things away, like dioceses actually playing a big role, regular bishops playing a big role, I think that's okay because you want to centralize what you care about and who you care about. You can abstract certain things like those councils as well, right? By just saying you have a decision to get money, you have a decision to spread a rite, yada, yada, yada. Those would be held in councils, but turning them into activities is a lot of involvement and a lot of going to activities. Although I will say, if you made it into like a regional council when a rite changes their tenet, right? So like, let's say I am the puppet master of an archbishop, and I tell that archbishop to change a tenet. If you held a council, I think that would be cool, where people could fall off an archdiocese, people could disagree, there could be really easy and in agreement, and that spreads the new rite much, much faster. It also just would make it feel way more involved if I'm not the one doing this, like this rite changing, right? If I went to this and was like, oh damn, they're doing this stuff, I can oppose it or be in favor of it. I can see it being abstracted away, to be honest with you. I mostly care about the influence and the power that these archdioceses hold, and me meddling with them holds directly, right? Again, I had all of these examples, I've given them to you when it comes to the Slavs, when it comes to the Scandinavians, to the Poles, to the Saxons and whatnot, and how that impacts the rule in those areas, and I think they are reflecting those really nicely outside of the open questions. 10 out of 10, if they just keep going like this and all of my worries are being addressed. Folks, I'm going to leave you right here, my brain is mush, let me tell you, and I'll see you later, alligator.